Get Analysis with Giorgio Cafiero in Washington, D.C. He's the CEO of Gulf State Analytics, a geopolitical risk consulting firm. Giorgio, thanks for taking the time to speak to us. So a significant portion of the Israeli population, as we can see from these weekly demonstrations, is against the resumption of the war. Even the U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff says Netanyahu's actions in Gaza are against Israeli public opinion. Why then is the Israeli Prime Minister so insistent on continuing to wage this war?
Yeah, thank you. Great to be on your program. You're absolutely right that when Witkoff was on Tucker Carlson's podcast, he did make that point. You know, had the Israeli government agreed to go into phase two, which Hamas was ready to do, and Hamas was wanting to enter into phase two, that would have resulted in the remaining Israeli captives being freed and released by Hamas. The Israeli leadership, though, was very clear that they did not want the ceasefire process to move ahead. And Netanyahu and those around him were very clear that they wanted the war to resume. They made no bones about it. Netanyahu has been committed to trying to completely eliminate and annihilate Hamas. Right after October 7th, he made it clear that this was one of the goals that Israel was pursuing in its war against Gaza. And we obviously know that when the ceasefire went into effect on January 19, Hamas certainly weakened. The Palestinian group had been dealt some blows by Israel, but it was far from annihilated. And it was not an outcome that the Israeli leadership was able to find acceptable. On top of all of that, there definitely is something to say about the fact that the ceasefire posed a threat to the stability and cohesion of Netanyahu's cabinet, the ruling coalition. And so to ensure that the coalition would stay together, Netanyahu had his own incentives to get the war started again. And then also considering Netanyahu's own legal situation in Israel, he has his own personal reasons for wanting the country to be back at war. So I think there's really a combination of all these factors that help us explain why Netanyahu was so eager to get the war started again after almost 2 months of relative calm in Gaza.
So a lot of moving parts at play here, and one of those parts that you mentioned is Netanyahu wanting to destroy, to eliminate Hamas. Now he says it's about putting pressure on Hamas to release those hostages. But do you think Hamas is really feeling that pressure right now, or is most of that pressure really, or the consequences thereof, being felt by civilians in Gaza who are bearing the brunt of this, as always?
Well, what Netanyahu wants to do is destroy Hamas, get the hostages back through force, and then have Israel reoccupy the Gaza Strip through, a presence on the ground in the coastal enclave. I think from Hamas's perspective, the leverage they have comes from continuing to hold the hostages. And if they understand that Israel's ultimate aim is to completely wipe out Hamas and take control of Gaza through forces on the ground, you have to question what motivation Hamas would have for handing over the captives. But to your point, I mean, there's no doubt, while the Israeli government obviously frames this as a war against Hamas, there's no denying that this is really a war against the people of Gaza. We saw the one cancer hospital that was completely blown up very recently. It is just the latest sign of evidence that Israel is obviously committed to waging a war against the people of Gaza. There's no doubt about that.
There are also now calls from Israel's allies like the UK and France to return to that ceasefire, for Israel to allow aid to enter Gaza. But are those calls likely to turn into actual concrete action that forces Israel to do this, especially at a time when you also have a US president who fully supports strong action in Gaza and against Hamas?
I don't think the pressure from the Europeans will make any difference here. I wish that pressure would make a difference, but I don't think it will. All that matters is the policies of the Trump administration. If the Trump administration would put pressure on Israel to come back into a ceasefire, Israel would have no choice but to do so. But if the Trump administration gives Israel the green light to continue with this genocide, that's what the Netanyahu government is going to do, because they will be able to do it. The only country in the whole world that has the leverage to bring Israel back into a ceasefire, unfortunately, is the United States. Therefore, the one variable in the equation that matters, policies of the Trump administration. What policymakers in European capitals are saying really does not matter here.
Giorgio Cafiero, thank you so much for your analysis. He's the CEO of Gulf State Analytics. Thanks very much.
Good to be with you.